All right, welcome everybody, to the panel on energy as part of the Rebuild Puerto Rico's conference, and it's the third summit of within the third summit of the Puerto Rican Diaspora. I think I have my name somewhere here.
No, those plans.
I forgot mine too, so we'll have to here, we can have our tags if you can see those. But I totally forgot mine as well.
So I'm Jorge Gonzalez. I'm professor of the City College of New York, mechanical engineering. Also senior scientist at the CREST Research Center. And Gelvin asked me to lead this panel, which is a great honor. We have three panelists in addition to the moderator. Great folks with great experience. I'm going to briefly introduce them. I'm going to give a few intro words to put us on context, and each panelist will lead one question for a few minutes, and we'll go to that for about 3-4 questions, and we'll open for open discussions from the attendants. And we have different sites, so we have a great audience here. Thank you for coming. I understand that we have audience in the island, and I hope they can hear us all right. I don't know if they can see us, but if they can hear us all right, that would be great. And I hope that we can hear them, their questions back. And if not, please contact some of the organizers to fix any problem, technical problem alone. We have one of the panelists is also online, and I will get to him in a few minutes. So to my left, we have Ms. Ruth Santiago. She's a lawyer by profession. She's a resident of the town of Salinas, Puerto Rico, in the southern coast of the island, straight south from San Juan. And she also is a community organizer. There you go. All right. Okay. Yeah. I think we can take that out now. Okay. Sorry about that.
You should put your phone on mute. Yeah. Or not take it into the bathroom.
Okay. So we have Dr. Gelvin Stevenson. He is to my right here in the center of the table, and Gelvin, he works with clean energy companies. He's in the business of commercializing new energy technologies. So he identified good technologies and find funds to get them going and in the market. He also organized a forum that is called the Greentech Investor Forum that meets every month here in New York City. On the clean technologies come and present their technology, some sort of pitch, I guess. And if people like it, investors like it, then they will take it from there. And he's quite familiar with Puerto Rico. He's married to Dr. Clara Rodriguez, and I think they have a home in Cabo Rojo and all that. So Boquerón, yeah. So quite familiar with the energy sector in the island, and particularly with the issues presented by Hurricane Maria. Online, we have the engineer Gerardo Cosme, and Gerardo Cosme is a licensed electrical engineer in the island. He's been in the business of solar energy technologies, design, installation, promotion for over 25 years. I personally know Gerardo because we probably installed, or he installed, with a little help from our side at the UPR Maya West, one of the first systems in Mona Island. That was probably 25 years ago. And we have done so many big projects in the island in the past, and he has done a lot more. So I have the high respect for him. He's probably one of the greatest champions of promoting solar energy in the island. And he will bring his on-the-ground perspective to this panel. So I think it's a great panel that a lot of experience, a lot of hands-on experience over many years, and particularly in the context of the rebuild. And talking about the context, one aspect that we are going to emphasize in this panel is on the rebuild, not so much about what happened. We covered a lot of that back in October, and most of all knows the story. But what has taken place, what has transpired in terms of the rebuild of the infrastructures. As you know, that the Hurricane Maria impacted heavily the island, and particularly electrical grid and all the interconnections and interconnected infrastructure. So the power grid is so connected to other infrastructure that stopped the island over months. And it's been now 9 months since that happened. Water supplies got cut, communication got cut, health services got disrupted, all of that because the central infrastructure was heavily impacted. So the panel will explore, review what has gone on, what is the current state of rebuild, and whether the rebuild is resilient enough, what community responses have there been to cope with the slow recovery, and as important is to move forward, how we look forward the future for a resilient energy infrastructure on the island, what may be the options and what may be the challenges to get into a robust futuristics as needed for the island. So that's the context of the panel, and I have to say to lead that. So I'm going to start with the first questions, and the first question is, what is the current state of the Puerto Rico energy system? And I'm going to allow Gerardo Cosme to start the conversation, followed by Ruth. Gerardo, you are open, and so is your dog.
Hello. First of all, nice to be here online today. And thanks for your words previously that you say. You hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, to start, the question is very ample. It's a lot of things when you say electrical system. I will say that in two sections, transmission and distribution. On transmission, we have still a fragile network of redundancy. We have enough transmission lines online as redundant as sound, enough to supply the power through the island, but we don't have the redundancy that we are supposed to have on normal times. On the distribution side, we had, well, the power authority here in the island claim that they are about over 90% of the distribution up ready, but it's still fragile. We have a lot of distribution side blackouts or power failures for a few hours sometimes, but it's getting better, and we are going that way. That's the state of that electrical system right now, as I perceive that.
Yeah, thank you, Gerardo. So in terms of the generation, what was your accounts of the impacts, and where did those islands stand on restoring the generation capacity of the island? My understanding is that the installed capacity is close to 4 gigawatts. After the storm, does the island has that installed capacity, or has been diminished significantly, or perhaps was diminished prior to the hurricane?
Yeah, I didn't mention power generation because that infrastructure really didn't suffer that much. The damage was done mostly in the transmission and distribution system, and also because other factors rather than the hurricane, for example, economy and migration, all that situation that we are having now, we are having a decrease in power generation or energy consumption in general. So we have enough generation at this time to supply our power need. It's a matter of have enough wire to distribute it.
Thank you. So Ruth, I'm going to pass on to you your perspective.
Okay, so I agree with Gerardo. The system is very fragile, right? We gotta remember that PREPA was created to provide universal electric service to the people of Puerto Rico, and also to facilitate the US entering into World War II, right? To get the war machine going. And PREPA accomplished its goal of universal electric service. I've heard late 70s, early 80s, but that was accomplished even in the most remote places, and even with the haphazard planning of communities in Puerto Rico. We in Puerto Rico have, we're a volcanic island, and the terrain is somewhat rugged. And in fact, PREPA was at one time a pioneer in the installation of electric poles and transmission towers and cables in rugged terrain using helicopters. Allegedly, according to the PREPA webpage, PREPA was the first to do that. So in a sense, PREPA was technologically advanced, at least in its initial years. And even later on, PREPA did have a very early battery energy storage system that unfortunately did not succeed. So totally agree with Gerardo. In terms of generation, we have 5,836 megawatts of installed generation. And what's that? Yeah, sure. 5,836 megawatts of installed generation, according to PREPA's IRP. Angelica can tell us more. And we have energy demand, as Gerardo mentioned, right? Our energy demand is steadily decreasing in Puerto Rico. Since 2006 was about the peak year when it was something like 3,030 megawatts, Lionel, and Gerardo, is that about right?
Yeah, it's about, or a little bit of 2,000 megawatts. I mean, gigawatts.
Okay, and then now,
16 gigawatt hour was the last peak.
Okay, I'm not an engineer. When they start talking about gigawatts, I start getting, I got to translate this, but we have the idea, aside from the exact numbers, which we don't really need. The idea is that we have roughly double the installed capacity, generation capacity, than the current demand. I saw something that Siemens put out recently that says about 2,800 megawatts. Right? We have a lot of plants. We have a lot of dirty plants, especially in southern Puerto Rico. As most of you know, 70% or so of the generation is in southern Puerto Rico, a lot of it in southeastern Puerto Rico. The Aguirre Power Complex in Salinas is the biggest plants in one, and Guayama AES coal burning power plant, also very contaminating, is also in that area. So we have in southeastern PR like 25% over and above what southwestern PR has. And there are some plants in San Juan, but You know, most of the generation happens in Puerto Rico. And then the problem is, and you've probably all heard about, and as people mentioned here, transmission of energy from the south to the north is a major problem. There was a historical reason for this. I don't think I have time to get into that, but we now have a situation where the hurricane, you know, affected different calculations about how much of the transmission and distribution system went down. Some say 80, some say %. But the point is that even as we have some of the transmission lines up, there's no redundancy, so there's no backup, right? And so we still have a problem with, like, April 18th, massive blackout, PTSD for everybody in Puerto Rico, right? Where, you know, we knew we'd be out of power for maybe a day or 2 or 3. And so that is, as I see it, the current state of the grid.
Thank you, Ruth. So, Gelvin, you want to add something on this? Yeah.
Yes.
So I do see that Lionel Orama is online, and he was going to be here. And I'm going to ask Lionel if as a part of the panelists. So, Lionel, are you all right to jump on this, some of these questions?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, and if you can, introduce briefly yourself, we'll appreciate that.
Sure. I totally agree with both Gerardo and Tara. First of all, clarifying some of the numbers, the total capacity of PREPA right now, including their capacity and the capacity of the private generators, including Ecoelectrica and the renewables, utility scale renewables, is about 6,000 megawatts. So it's about 6 gigawatts in capacity. In 2016, there was a little increase in the demand, a very small increase, less than 1% in the demand, and it was about 3,200 megawatts. So that's the condition basically before Hurricane Maria. On the other hand, I totally agree also in what the problem was after the hurricane. The hurricane cleaned up the transmission and distribution system. The breakdown of the system was transmission and distribution. The plants were ready and able to generate in a couple of weeks. However, the damage to the transmission system, especially the lines that cross, as Tata said, the lines that cross the island from south to north, 200 kV lines and 1,500 kV lines were all damaged, and recovering from this centralized system is very difficult, in part because of the quantity of towers that were down, the amount of lines, of miles and miles of lines that were down, and you know, it's been a humongous task to recover the system. So looking back at the recovery also, we have to take into account that since the restructuring negotiations have been happening, a lot of employees retire. Mostly, or not mostly, but much of them were experienced linemen that have been in other recoveries like this, so or not as these, but you know, recoveries from hurricanes, storms, etc. So PREPA had less linemen that we need. They were about 4 weeks working alone without any help from companies from anywhere. So the first part of the recovery was very hard for them. The contract with Whitefish was signed almost a month after the hurricane. So forgetting about what happened with that contract and stuff, the contract was signed almost 4 weeks after the storm. That's that's a very low response in the recovery. And 2 weeks after that, apparently that contract was rejected. However, that was about 6 weeks after the storm, was when PREPA started negotiating with APPA. The recovery was slow at the beginning, then it started to accelerate, but the result is that 7, 8 months, almost 8 months after the hurricane, where we still have supposedly 5% of our population without any energy.
Thank you, Lionel. Yeah, so this is a great feedback overall. So I guess in synthesis, the distribution capacity is being restored about 90%, and that has been the one that was the most heavily affected. And perhaps we can zoom in into some of these issues on the grounds. But it would be good to start moving forward a discussion on how we are going to. The island is going to rebuild the infrastructure in a very resilient way. And we'd like to know, Ruth, about what has been the community responses. I mean, we talk a lot about PREPA, we talk about other external agents, federal supports, low response, all of that. What the community has responded and how they are organizing and reacting to that. I know you have a lot of experience, at least you can share your thoughts on that particular topic.
Okay, so I think one of the lessons from Hurricane Maria was that literally communities had to take energy into their own hands, into our own hands, right? Because, the grid was down. There was, as Lionel said, this Whitefish situation of, a company that knew nothing about, had previously hardly any real experience with this magnitude of a problem, and Cobra is not far behind. And so of necessity, right? And we had all the responses were all across the board, right? So we had people who we became known in the press here in the States as Generator Island. I think over 100,000 generators even were purchased in the aftermath of the hurricane in Puerto Rico, and obviously there were some before that. And also, at least the groups that I'm working with and the people that I know started looking for more sustainable alternatives. We know, in fact, even before the hurricane, we had in El Coquí meetings with PREPA on other issues that I won't go into now. But for example, one community member in El Coquí said, well, I put up my panels. This was 2-3 years ago. I did my whole installation at my home, and he took us to his home, and we saw that he had done, people used a lot of marine batteries, panels that they buy for $100 or like $1 per watt or whatever. They get 750 inverters. The whole sort of slew of alternatives that people used literally to be able to survive for so long without power. And we're continuing those efforts. I mean, the project that we're working on in Southeastern PR, because we are in the shadow of these big plants that contaminate a great deal and affect public health in the communities, in addition to the natural, the environment. So the project we're working on with Debajo, Iniciativa de Ecodesarrollo de Bahía de Jobos, is called Coqui Solar. And like other communities, especially organized communities, people in juntas, people in Castaño, in San Juan, and other communities are doing initially energizing their community centers from which services were provided, right? So the community groups that were already organized immediately went into action and started serving food and providing, you know, basic necessities for their members, mutual aid and, you know, self-efforts. And so it was logical to think that we have to, you know, we have to power at least these community centers. So that was the pilot project. We've done that and continue to operate from those places. But we had been planning with the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez and other partners, like Instituto Tecnológico de Guayama and other organizations, a solar community as such, right? Just to create the first solar community in Puerto Rico. And we're working on that. We have a pre-design that was made, supervised by the University of Puerto Rico Mayagüez professors and sort of put together by the students. We are doing energy literacy. We now in Puerto Rico relate very differently to energy from what we did before, right? People are much more familiar about like what plant is the one that provides energy to them. People know the numbers of the transmission lines now. When they say la 50,100 se cayó, people know, you know, and like, when on April 18th, when we had the big blackout and you know, everyone knew exactly what line it was and what happened right away. And so, you know, we're very aware that the system is very fragile and that the narrative used to be, this is too complicated, energy is too complicated for communities, but things have changed. You know, we don't need big central station fossil fuel generation plants anymore. There's, as the professors at Mayagüez have said, the Achievable Renewable Energy Target study in 2009 indicates that we have an immense rooftop, in addition to the sun, of course, right? But we have an immense rooftop resource. Puerto Rico has all these sprawling urbanizations, right? These developments. And those rooftops are really good for placing you know, PV equipment, and this is not just a matter of technology, it's a matter of how we now can relate to energy in a different way. And so we start with, in any community, with energy use inventories. Let's be aware of, you know, what our energy usage is, how we can get more energy efficient appliances in there and lighting, how we can conserve more, how we can try to work with that nighttime peak, which is our problem in Puerto Rico, and that keeps the dirty plants on unnecessarily. We have a huge generation reserve. You know, the plants stay on even if they're not being used, just in case, right? And so if we curb that nighttime peak, we can, so those are the things we're doing at the community level. And we're doing this in El Coquí. We're working with El Puente de Williamsburg that has an office in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And this is a bottom-up alternative. We are sure, in conjunction with experts in the field, with INESI that Lionel helped to found, and with our local installers in Puerto Rico, we're sure we can transform this system and do it with the support of the diaspora.
Thank you very much. Very nice. Very good. So, Gerardo, I'd like you to please add to your experience in how the communities are responding from the perspective of demand of solar technologies, and what are the on-the-ground challenges in terms of financing, for example, and how fast the system can be deployed so they make the communities more resilient. And I guess the issue of redundancy is tied to that discussion as well. So we'll appreciate how you can put a few minutes on your experience. I know you've been busy in installing a lot of these systems lately.
Yeah, I would like to divide the PV systems in two categories. The first one is the category like Ruth was saying, is the kind of system that people are installing and acquiring by themselves. Those systems usually are very informal in design and in conception, and they will solve immediate problems, but I think that one of the problems or barrier in this is people need a lot of education here in the island to how to implement this kind of technology that they can take full advantage of it. For example, especially if you're using battery storage, it's going to take a lot of cost in that, and unless you use promising emerging technology like lithium batteries that right now cost over 1,000 kilowatt hour installed cost at the current time, it's going to be very difficult to use a widespread solar system in Puerto Rico that they are self-supported on battery storage. So we still need a grid to support that network of solar system or rooftop solar systems, and because of that, by the nature of the intermittency of solar, still we will need a generation, unfortunately, from fossil fuels some more time to accomplish that. And the thing is, I think, is to try to switch or to gear the change from bigger fossil fuels units to much more smaller units that are widespread in the island. So we can go more toward microgrid settings in the island. If you do that, you can then install rooftop solar that could have some small battery storage capacity, but it doesn't have to rely on those batteries as right now is doing a lot in their homes that they don't have power right now. And it's going to be more sustainable at the long run in environmental terms and economics too. So I think that's the way to go.
Thank you, Gerard. So this is opens up to the next set of questions that I'd like to delve into lead us in.
If I, before, I'm sorry, Jorge, let me interrupt just a second. Before we leave that, I think everybody, you know, right now, the, excuse me, that nighttime peak, the Ruth talked about and the gentleman we're talking about, is a real problem. But in addition to batteries, as one solution for that, which is expensive, there are base load renewables. Okay, there are renewable energies that can work as your base load, providing power 24 hours a day. Okay, so full disclosure, I work for a biomass waste to energy unit, a very clean burn, small. And we're trying to do some work in Puerto Rico. There are about 60 of these units out. They burn clean biomass and are just proven they've fulfilled all their environmental permits and the like. But there's not just that. There's you've got in Puerto Rico, you've got OTEC, which is the Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion. Okay. And you've got waves, you've got tides. Those go on all day, all night, at varying degrees of intensity or power, of course. And you've got some hydro, and there could be more hydro, even very low head hydro. And there's even ways you can put generators in pipes. So in the water system, when the water is coming downhill, that's energy, that's creating energy. And often you have to put in valves there to slow it down so that when it gets to where it comes out of your faucet, it doesn't come shooting out. And you can generate energy there. Okay? But there are a lot of ways we can do this without, and still avoid the this horrible problem of having these coal-fired power plants run all night and not even be used.
Yeah, and perhaps the microgrid concept, I'd like you to explore that concept, whether the microgrid solution, which could be a multi-source, meaning that there could be a number of energy options where the microgrid can be supplied, which could be solar, could be wind. So the question I have for us and for the panel, and I'd like for, if possible, Gerard and Lionel to comment on this. What is preventing the rapid deployment of microgrids? And I'm going to give you one example. We received a call not too long ago, meeting CUNY, City University of New York, to support one of the islands, Culebra particularly. And the mayor is all about putting together a whole new utility company, municipal utility company, and we are sympathetic about that. It was just so in the context of some kind of RFP that looks very dubious to us, and we express our interest to work with the island in establishing their own utility company and resolve some of the technicals and financial issues with our expertise and our networks of collaborators. But in thinking in those terms, there are a number of issues. No? The distribution is owned by PREPA. So who deals with that? Eventually, who is going to guarantee the payments of the individual system? In US, there are a number of municipality-owned utility companies, and even in the New York State, there are a number of them. Small villages, they own their own power grid, all that. So these issues have been resolved, and perhaps that could be one aspect of resiliency. So Gerardo, Lionel, could you guys comment on this issue of the deployment of microgrids and the challenges on that, which possibly is part of the solution for a redundant, resilient system?
I can say something around that. First of all, we have a list of barriers. In my opinion, the first one is the financial barrier, which is in part real and in part mental. And why I say this is because, for example, most of the people believe that, for example, just for an example, solar energy is very expensive. And it is if you have to buy all the equipment and pay for installation and stuff like that. If you do the economic analysis of for example, the solar PV system, you will see that the cost per kilowatt hour is less than half what we are paying PREPA right now. So it's part financial, it's part mental, because people continue to say it's very expensive. However, a lot of people with at least the capacity to finance, to get a loan, can have their at least an equipment that can help them in an emergency, and the rest of the time is paying for itself. So that's maybe two barriers in that place. The other barrier that, as you mentioned, the distribution system belongs to PREPA. So there's a lot of efforts that have been created to increase the renewables penetration. However, still today is kind of difficult to have your system connected to PREPA and start paying by itself right away. So that's another part of the problem. As I mentioned before, the only renewable resource that we have is not the sun. We have a lot of biomass in Puerto Rico, Actually, we are trying to develop a microgrid actually for the UPR in Mayagüez. And the base load for that microgrid will be microturbines that initially will use propane or diesel fuel, but they are capable of change directly to biogas. And that's something that we have to start promoting, that we can produce our own base load based on other alternative resources. I agree with many of the things that have been discussed. Definitely, we cannot go from less than 2% renewables to 100% renewables in just 1 year or 2 years. We need to create a transition, but that transition needs a vision of the country, of the nation, however you wanted to call it, Puerto Rico, how we want an energy system for Puerto Rico, from Puerto Ricans and to Puerto Ricans. You know, we need the vision clear. We have done in more than 10 years, we have done a lot of work in that direction. Still, the government doesn't adopt that vision that the constituents of the energy constituents in Puerto Rico have developed in more than 10 years. So that's a huge barrier in the development of renewables, because once you see the big companies talking about IRPs, they'll always talk about huge fossil plants, H-class and stuff, when we have to, as Gerardo said, we have to look for smaller fossil units that works with natural gas, F-class units, for example, that are small enough and fast enough, has the flexibility to help improve and increase the penetration of renewables in the island. Also, the use of micro turbines and biogas, etc. Another barrier maybe that microgrids has is until the hurricane, there were no examples in Puerto Rico of microgrids working alone. I've been talking a lot recently about the micro or mini grid that we have in Mayagüez, which belongs to PREPA, and use the gas turbines that we have in Mayagüez. That micro or mini grid island from the rest of the system, and in 4 days after the hurricane, we have 2 hospitals running up with electric power from PREPA from that grid. In less than 2 weeks, we have 4 health facilities. We have some schools. We have the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez, part of it. We have part of the town, some commercial facilities. You know, the concept of the macro or
Can I, he went to get his dog. So can I say something in terms of what?
I apologize for that. I'm at home, so you know, the dogs are having a ball here. So that concept was tested and proved to be reliable and resilient after the hurricane. So that's a thing that we have to start thinking and planning to implement. And maybe after the hurricane, more and more people will have the idea of what a microgrid is.
Great, and yeah, and if you're thinking about micro turbines, I hope that you're considering a combined heat and power on the campus. That's what makes the system fully sustainable and efficient. So I'll be happy to share information with you on this. So we got Ruth wanted to intervene, and we get Gelvin.
What we introduced the subject of microgrids, right? Which basically is defined. I mean, It's a discrete generating unit. It could be one building or a few or more. And that is able to generate for that facility and connect and disconnect from the larger grid. And that's what we're talking about in Puerto Rico. That would be a better option than to rely on, you know, the long distance transmission from the south to the north, especially since most of the demand is in the San Juan metro area. So Lionel mentioned, we have a problem with the government not seeming to work in that direction. Jorge mentioned that there's a request for proposals for an energy system for the islands of Vieques and Culebra. And we all know Vieques and Culebra are offshore island municipalities that are just ideal places for solar microgrids, right? Because, for example, Culebra has a population of about 2,000. Vieques more, but it's gone down a lot too. They have already a lot of rooftop solar installations, especially Culebra. They have, the government's proposing an incredible thing. It's like they are saying that they want vendors to submit proposals for a 4-year solution. Why? Because they claim that the transmission cable that provides power from Naguabo to Vieques was severed with damage during the hurricane. And so they want to continue to rely on that as a permanent arrangement and have a 4-year solution of some kind of generation system, which looks, the specs look like they're pointing to like some kind of mobile diesel generators or maybe some other fossil fuel based generators that would work for 4 years, and then who knows what would happen to them and who knows what that would cost, rather than go to renewable like solar communities, rooftop solar, because obviously they're small islands, they don't have a lot of space, and even Puerto Rico in general does not have a lot of land to do solar arrays all over the place, right?
Why 4 years? 4 years so they can hook up to Naguabo?
No, they're saying that it's going to take 4 years to repair the transmission cable from Naguabo to Vieques, and then there's a cable from Vieques to Culebra, which supposedly the one from Vieques to Culebra is working. But so rather than say, let's do solar community microgrids in a place where you already have a lot of rooftop solar and you have incredible, you know, sun potential, and then use, maybe if they ever do repair the cable, use that as backup, or use, they have generators there already that can provide backup. No. There's a lot of lip service, there's a lot of confusion out there about going forward, what exactly we are really going to do. And I would prefer to work on community projects to, but sometimes we have to balance out the resistance work we have to do and the proactive community solutions that we're putting forth. And as you see, it continues to be very difficult.
Let me.
Yeah, let's just have, you know, one more intervention with Gelvin, and I'm happy to open for the forum.
I'll be quick. Lionel, I wanted to mention that the president of the League of Cooperatives was here yesterday, and he mentioned that he had gone to the governor to talk about setting up electric co-ops, which would be a brilliant idea, and the governor said no or discouraged him. But the co-ops, I think, might be an excellent source of financing for the small-scale household and other solar installations you're talking about, because they do pay back. Number two, I meant so in addition to investor-owned, PREPA being investor-owned, PREPA being government-owned, and they are talking about privatization now, you could also make the co-ops or the municipally owned utilities. Finally, there's an elephant in this room, and that's PREPA.
Yeah.
And how you control PREPA, I mean, PREPA, they have not met their RP goal. Legislature passes public, no, not the public-private, where you have to have a certain amount of energy.
Energy portfolio,
Renewable portfolio standards, thanks. a law and PREPA continually fails to meet the requirements set out by the legislature. Until we talk about, and there's so I get so much email from all kinds of various things. People write about the need for microgrids, the need for renewable. Puerto Rico can do this. I don't hear any way, any strategy to deal with PREPA. So that's my point. I'm going to hand this out again. If anybody wants to be on an opt-in email list for this group, I will take responsibility for writing your emails down, sending your emails to everybody, and nothing else. So it's yours after that.
Okay.
Pardon me? I'm not going to spell your name.
So,
If you get something in Russian, don't blame me.
We're gonna be opening now we have about 20 plus minutes, all right? And as we open the discussion to our audience, two topics to keep in mind. One is that the island being aggressive enough to promote a reliable, resilient system that has redundancy. I mentioned this, California just yesterday passed a new legislation that will require for every single new building to come up with solar powers. So this is not a rocket science, seems to be. So there seems to be that there is some policy regulation that can be facilitate the restore of the power grid in the long term. So something to keep in mind. And the other issue is energy efficiencies. Through energy efficiencies, system can be more reliable because the peak demand is reduced. So there are many opportunities out there to consider, taking into consideration that the largest energy consumer sector in the island is actually the buildings, and both residential and commercial. So it's a tremendous opportunity for the island to lead the world in energy efficiencies in that particular sector. So something to keep in mind, and we'll be happy now to open the discussion. And we're gonna have to do a little bit of order, so we start here, and we go along this way. All right?
Jorge.
Gerardo, yes?
Yes, I would like, before start that, let me say something about microgrids, about the barriers.
Please be brief. All right.
Okay. Yeah, one thing that the distribution system in Puerto Rico is very complex, and that's not a barrier, that's an advantage that we have. We have a lot of distribution lines everywhere in the island. I think that the important thing here that is a barrier is that we need smart grid. We need to smarten the grid to provide the foundation to have a successful microgrid system. And that will be possible if we focus on economically viable solution, because right now, the PREPA we know today is the PREPA. The current PREPA today is not the same like what it was yesterday. PREPA it was controlled by the government. Now it's making a transition, and the transition, I hope, and everybody hopes, is going to go to be to what is best to the island in terms of economical development. So if the technology is focused on that progress, it will be a good solution toward the goal of have microgrid and lower the dependence of fossil fuels and big generation plants.
Thank you, Gerardo. We take your comment. So let's go to please state your name and organization if it applies. So please.
Okay, I'm Lorena Franco. I work as an economist focused on Latin America. Regarding the solar panels, I think as
We have a mic first, maybe, yeah.
Oh.
Can you guys hear Lorena?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so perhaps that will help, yeah.
So regarding the solar panels, I think, you know, my mom went to Adjunta Casa Pueblo 2 weeks ago. So there's been a lot of awareness going on with solar panels. And the other part of it is obviously being able to purchase it. As Lionel was saying, you know, people who can't financially get it, that's one population. But at the other hand, there are people that before the hurricane, they were in an economic vulnerable position, even more after the hurricane. So, you know, with this solar panel strategy, this should be able to be something that is accessible to all. So that's obviously with the communities and having that in the communities. But my question is are there grants for, you know, individual families, maybe not pay all of it, but some that, you know, okay, we'll pay for some, or we'll so that it can be accessible.
Great question. So the question by Lorena is about how the communities and the people can finance solar system, for example. And I'd like to mention that there are well-established programs within US. Some has been extended to the island where companies pay off front. I mean, in my house in Long Island, somebody came and installed it, and then we got the rebate from the state and all of that. We haven't paid a single penny yet for installing the system. There's some commitments, you know, in using the system for a number of years. Yeah, less than that, 10, 12, it depends on the program. The company can put the upfront, or the individual can put the upfront and deduct that from the tax break. So they are well-established programs for residents, individual families. Some of them have been extended to the island, but may not. So I just want to mention this and put the question back to our colleagues on the ground, whether how accessible the communities will have to this program. And also please extend on the concept of grants then in that case for, as Lorena indicated. So Ruth, you probably know quite a bit on that.
Okay, theoretically in Puerto Rico, there was a green fund to incentivize, provide part of the cost of the PV systems, especially. I remember people telling me, especially engineers like Efrain O'Neill, saying that they'd wait till 12 in the evening, you know, or, you know, the installers like Cosme wait till 12 in the evening and see if they could get in, you know, and get an opportunity to bid for their clients for those systems. Let's say it's not something people can really count on. And going even beyond, in terms of
tax credit, Ruth, they were not grants, they were tax credits.
Oh yeah, right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the family has to have income
Exactly.
to unload
Exactly.
the tax.
So going to the most low-income communities, which is what we work with, right? What we have a strategy to address that, and something else that that was mentioned in terms of the you know, if you establish a solar community, how are you going to address the distribution system that belongs to PREPA, right? And how are you going to address those costs? What we're thinking is to do a transition with solar kits, which is a partial solar installation that we're now working with UPR Mayagüez and, or Efrain O'Neill, I should say, and MIT, Professor David Chu and other people who are helping us trying to figure out what is the minimum energy demand in the homes of the neediest people in these communities, and do installations of solar kits with people from the community, so to give them the practical experience to provide for that critical energy need. And PREPA never even finds out, because it's sort of an energy demand management mechanism, right? Because you're reducing your demand, but PREPA has no idea why, right? Because this is a parallel system. It's not net metering, in other words, right? So that one way to do it is that certainly the credit unions are now very much more interested. Think of it, their business is to make loans, right? And the economy in Puerto Rico is such that people are not necessarily, they're not building houses, we have all this, you know, housing stock that's not being used. So that would be an ideal business opportunity for the credit unions. They seem to be interested. We've had conversations with them as well. And especially for these solar kits, it would be just, you know, a very doable thing, even for the most low-income people. And of course, there are grants. I mean, we did the pilot installation with grants. We have our compañeros here from Connecticut who have been helping us to raise funds and to get the word out about what we're doing. And as there are other communities, we have Sierra Club here represented, who has been a tremendous partner in getting funding. Lots of organizations did fundraising for relief efforts, and they're using it in that way. And that's our recommendation. We got immediate needs like food and water. We got too many water bottles, so we needed water filters. But okay, so we did that, and now we're on to, okay, let's face the next hurricane season, how we're really going to prepare and get resilient. We think that's one way. It's a very community-based, ground-up way in which certain partners and allies can contribute. And if we're able to, actually get this off the ground in terms of doing the actual installations, I think it'll at least be a relief for the neediest people in these.
We're gonna move forward on the next question on the back, yes?
Yeah.
Can you please state your name, please?
My name is Gretchen Sears-Zarita, and I'm with the National Puerto Rican Agenda, among other things. Very quickly, I met a couple weeks ago, Dr. Owen is the former VP of Bell Labs, and he's now directing an advisory group that is advising PREPA. I was unaware of this group. I do have this person's contact if somebody wants to talk to me afterwards. And so I was thinking, Dr. Owen's group, which is completely volunteer, being pro bono, that he should be able to funnel into this group. And so that's one piece of information. The second piece of information was like also a couple of weeks ago in Washington, I don't know if he's a doctor or what, but his last name is Rifkin. And he came to talk to a group in Congress. I was in Congress with people that were there. I was there. And basically what Rifkin, his consulting company, what they're doing, they've done this in Europe. What they do is that, he talked, it was very interesting. He said, in my generation, independence meant freedom. The freedom meant independence, and independence to do whatever you wanted to do. In the current generation, freedom means access, access you want. And so that the power gets produced from this, linear system to access systems, and then the role of the utility company would be in managing the microgrids and managing that traffic, and that's how it would profit, and then you would have these microgrids. Clearly, we're so backwards that concept is not even a glimmer in Puerto Rico, okay? Here's the last question. I get very frustrated because I hear you guys talking, and what you say makes a lot of sense to me, but the current government plan that was approved in the Cámara de Representantes this week and that's going to the Senate, number one, has no place for the Energy Commission. We all do that. Number two, they're saying there's nothing that stipulates the kilowattage. So they're saying, oh, we will hold them to something between 12 to 15 cents a kilowatt. And there is no provision that doesn't say that the person that buys the generation will not be in the public-private partnership. But there's nothing to prevent you from buying all the generation. There's no anti-monopoly clause, so a clause in there. So I guess my question is, what can we do to stop this train going in the direction that is fearful and clearly not dictated for what's best for the people of Puerto Rico, from the rich to the poorest? This is not good for anybody, except the person maybe that buys these things and makes money selling it. And I don't understand why is it that we cannot stop this train, which is clearly everybody's going to lose in this transaction. That's my question.
Okay, very good. So for the sake of time, I'm going to make a comment and move on to the next question. And I'd like to have at least one question from the audience in Puerto Rico. There is folks there. Gretchen, I think we hear you. And my 1 cent on this is that we need a very powerful energy commission that really represents the interests of the people and watch for that. And there are many examples of strong energy commissions. California Energy Commission, for example, that just passed this new regulation as a function of the new building code, very progressive, leading the nation. So we need to empower, I believe, the Energy Commission that looks up to the benefits of the people and not the benefits of the interests of the people, not the interests of the private company necessarily.
The present governor is against that 100%.
Yeah.
Who's taking out those voices?
It's been proven and proven that without an external regulation that is made of stakeholder, representative of the stakeholder, different groups, we're always going to end up with some bad monopoly, and that has been the issue in part to Puerto Rico.
So what's your political strategy? You don't seem to have a strategy.
I think I don't have a strategy. I think we have to empower the Energy Commission somehow, either by regulation, and the people have to claim that we need an independent Energy Commission and be established by law that really has the power to regulate not only PREPA, any other utility supply provider. One question here, we go to one question in Puerto Rico, please.
I just have a question regarding,
We don't have time.
I know solar paint. That is something that's developed from the University of Melbourne. And I have some reaching out. I know it's in its infancy stage, but I'm not sure how much information you have regarding that. Actually, pilot for Vieques or Culebra in the island, and there's not so much red tape as far as we're dealing with. And then very briefly, I'm a lineman, and I spend that with it's a mess. One of the biggest problems out there is the government, the U.S. government. The U.S. government. The U.S. government is in charge of the Army Corps of Engineers, not PREPA. The Army Corps of Engineers controls PREPA. I go to the PREPA yard to get material. They actually try to throw me out the yard when I was getting material to repair the power lines. They wanted to throw me off the yard because I was missing a simple piece of paperwork. I'm there with trucks and so on and so forth, and they wanted to throw me off the property and not give me the equipment that I needed to do the repairs. And it's the same thing on the whole island. You know, they're holding back material. They ordered the wrong material. They ordered 5,000 transformers, which was the wrong kind, and that has to be sent back. And who pays for that? That's added to the debt. It's just everything that's happening in Puerto Rico is being controlled by the U.S. government, and nobody's talking about that. And that's the biggest holdup. So with all these brilliant, programs to implement here and implement there and all over the place, but the U.S. government has the final hammer, and if they say no, it's not on.
Okay, very good. So I'd like to get one question to the audience in Puerto Rico. Sure. Are there any questions from the audience in Puerto Rico? Yeah.
Basically referring to PREPA. What does look like dealing with PREPA, and has the community installed solar panels yet? Are you saying that PREPA should be had?
So let's go to the key question, which is very specific.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So yes, we do have the solar panels at the community center, which was used as the main oasis for the Salinas and Guayama coastal communities in the aftermath of the hurricane, right? So we do have that installation, and we have the Tesla Powerwall. I'm not advertising or anything here, but that's what we got. And we do have also some mobile power generators, the Yeti generators, which are moved around in the community. Well, they were being moved. Right now, people have power. So when we have an outage, we have a couple of mobile things that people with critical needs, but we want to do the incubator with the community youth who are now being trained in solar, but not just solar energy. I want to say energy literacy. That's the term we want to use, right? Because it has to do with how we relate and how we do energy efficiency and how we educate and think about it. So that is the incubator stage. They're in the training sessions with our experts, and they have not done in the community as such. No, we have a pre-design. It's a pre-design because it's students did it with the supervision of the professors, but it's really detailed. They've looked at all the transformers in the community, etc. In terms of the strategy, and with respect to PREPA, we have a very unique relationship with PREPA because in Salinas and Guayama, we have, as we mentioned, the biggest power complex, and we also have AES, which is has a power purchase agreement with PREPA, right? So they provide under PREPA's grid. And what we think is PREPA is a captured agency. It's captured by the fossil fuel cartels. And although they're talking about natural gas, it's just another cartel. It's just a substitution of one set of contaminants for another. We could talk about that for days, but we won't do that now. And what we think is that there, in terms of the whole proposal that Gretchen was mentioning, we need to look at this closely because according to the, for example, the American Public Power Utilities, American Public Power Association, for example, they've done studies that indicate that public companies, the average rates for public energy companies throughout the US are 14% cheaper in residential rates than the privately owned companies. Look at Hawaii. You have a lot of private generation there. You know what those rates look like? We complain in Puerto Rico because they're like, you know, they're in the 20s, sometimes gotten close to the 30s. In Hawaii, they're well into the 30s.
We will get into Hawaii.
Right.
Okay.
So that, I mean, so we think that the public,
Their income is so much higher than our income.
So,
right. So,
Ruth, So one last question on the audience here, and we wrap up. We have 4 more minutes.
Ask your question, then you need to let me.
Yes, exactly. But we don't know, we live here.
Well.
Cuomo has something to do with this too.
What's the question? Yes, please. Yeah, for the panel.
That's true. And that I think is a very upcoming Puerto Rico, incredible use of photovoltaic systems.
That's right. Exactly.
Water.
It's base load, 24 hours.
24 hours storage,
Yep.
just like electric vehicles,
Absolutely.
some vehicles, I mean.
Absolutely right. Yep.
Area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a significant amount of work in hydrogen-based technologies. A quick question is how we get the hydrogen, which could be also by solar panels. Tremendous amount of work in many places that can be adapted. So in wrapping up, I think we have a great update of what's going on. The buyers still out there. At the same time, it seems to be that the disaster is opening new opportunities because it opened the eyes that there are many other ways to get service by this critical infrastructure. And it seems to be that the communities are waking up to that opportunity. And it seems to be that it's an opportunity that if also not taken properly, it's going to be a missed opportunity. It's an opportunity to bring innovation, either smart microgrids through new technologies, whether it's solar, whether it's fuel cells, whether it's solar paints, this is the time to try this out, but perhaps a framework that will enable the deployment of these technologies and empower the communities. I think that by the little I have learned from Ruth and the conversation I had with the mayors of Culebra, there's also a lot of opportunity for getting the act on their own hands. That PREPA's intervention could be very minimal. If you establish your own privately owned microgrid, the intervention of PREPA is very minimal. How we do finance these, who service that, there's other issues out there, but I think that's open again opportunity for investments and new business opportunity. We've been discussing with Ruth and other communities in the island, how we create a sustainable business model where the communities can have their own microgrid on their own with very minimum intervention of PREPA. So I think that even the issues of what a PREPA owner, utility owns or not, can be resolved, but the willingness and key to that is education. So we all understand what we're getting into when we talk about microgrids, because now you're responsible for your own generation, and you need to understand what that happens. So I want to thank first the audience here and in the island, our panelists for sharing their experience and passion and wisdom and talent with us. Last time we took this conversation and we wrote a nice piece together, so I hope that we can capture that and we quote and we share with all of you. I think the center put it together in the newsletter, and even there was an open ed that Gelvin put out. So we look forward to share those last synthesis with you all. Thank you very much.